Hello, and thank you for pushing play and joining us in our little corner of the online universe. Welcome to State of the Arts, a podcast which is supported by Fís Éireann, Screen Ireland, through the Screen Stakeholders Funding Scheme. I'm Des Doyle, a writer, director, and creative consultant with more than 25 years' experience in the worlds of film and TV production, and I will be your host, as every 2 weeks we bring you a new episode which will focus on someone who's been extremely successful in their chosen medium, and we'll be both to look at their creative careers and their current and upcoming projects, as well as their take on some of the major news stories currently having an impact in their field of artistry. There will be 6 episodes in season 1 of the pod, and if you would like us to do more than that, then please add us to your playlists. Follow us on our Instagram account at SOTAPod, that's at SOTAPOD, and help us spread the word about the show. And of course, please let us know what you like and what you might like us to change as we go along. For our inaugural episode, I'm delighted that we are joined by one of Ireland's most successful director, producer, writers, currently working in the global streaming TV space, Mr. Ciarán Donnelly. Ciarán is a BAFTA and multiple IFTA award-winning filmmaker who's directed and produced some of the world's biggest TV shows, including global phenomena such as Amazon's The Wheel of Time, Netflix's Vikings Valhalla, and MGM History's Vikings. He co-created and executive produced the acclaimed Irish crime drama series Kin, starring Daredevil himself, Charlie Cox, for AMC+, which also became a breakout hit on RTE, BBC and Netflix, and has created the new series Sarah Says, which he is co-producing with the UK's Vertigo Films. He's been to the forefront of groundbreaking television for nearly 20 years. Other notable credits include directing multiple episodes of The Tudors, executive producer and director on Disney's Harley and the Davidsons, on NBC's Crossbones, starring John Malkovich, along with ABC's Once Upon a Time, and 3 Arts' Titanic Blood and Steel, starring Neve Campbell of the Scream movie franchise fame. He's currently directing the new Netflix original series Grown Ups, based on the Marion Keyes novel, which is currently filming in Dublin, as well as writing and developing new film and TV projects under his own banner, T4 Productions. So Ciarán, thank you very much for joining us for the inaugural episode of State of the Arts. It's a real pleasure to have you here.
Pleasure. Thanks, Des. Delighted to be here.
So I'm curious, was there a defining movie or TV show you saw when you were growing up that kind of lit the spark for you in terms of an interest in making film and television?
Well, that's a good question. Mostly, I really make TV. I haven't made a movie yet, believe it or not. Oh, actually, I have, kind of by accident, because one of my series that I directed was turned into a movie, and I was told about it after the fact, which is kind of wild. So what were the influences? When I was a kid, it was literally going to Savoy 1 O'Connell Street and whatever was playing then. And I guess it was the sort of Star Wars Superman world. I mean, this is like before film school, obviously, so I'm still at school at this stage. So they're very formative. And then I think The Godfather, the Coppola movies, Scorsese, the sort of big golden era of American movie making was a huge thing. And then I think probably like very early, some of our Irish filmmakers who we know, like the Neils and the Jims, Neil Jordan and Jim Sheridan, had a big influence, I guess, for sure. And then there was sort of the European world started to be fed to us a little bit. And it was kind of, I think, by Channel 4 in a way, we were starting to see Krzysztof Kozlowski movies and things like that feeding in. I think that stuff really caught me then in a different way, because it was just a sort of a different use, if you like, of the form of storytelling, different atmospheres and different ways of portraying the human condition and emotions and story and things like that. I suppose they're the kind of names. I can't sort of pin it down to one thing in particular where I thought, oh, that's what I want to do. But like, obviously, growing up, you're completely aware of it.
By osmosis over time then.
By osmosis, yeah. I mean, I suppose, and it sort of sounds kind of insane or in some ways generational to say, like, we just had an awful lot less in terms of the word content did not exist. So, you went to the cinema to see movies, or you saw some stuff on TV, but there was like maybe six TV channels. That was kind of it, and magazines, and we consumed things differently. So there was a more rarefied thing about it, I think, about films and TV and music generally. It was a more physical thing. You kind of physically made the effort to go somewhere, got on a bus, paid bus fare, went somewhere, went to a movie in the cinema. So, and then really the thing for me was it was a sort of a slow segue, slow but quick in a way, which sort of seems contradictory, but because originally I wanted to be in the music business, to be a sound engineer was the thing I really wanted to do. And then it was like, oh, you have to go to third level and go to college, which was an amazing thing for my parents to be saying. But that was kind of the general, go to college was a good idea. So I was looking for a course in sound engineering. There wasn't such a thing, but I found a course which was a post-leaving cert course, which had a module of sound engineering, sort of, but not really. But what it actually really had was video communications, photography, drama, dramatic writing, and things like this. And this was I think it was called the Design Communications Foundation course in Coláiste Dúlaigh in Coolock. So I managed to get into that after my terrible leaving cert, and I suppose discovered I had a keen interest in things visual through some good teachers, and the fact that we were like now taking photographs with stills cameras and processing them and printing them and doing all that sort of stuff. And then learning, I suppose, very rudimentary stuff about, how television programs in the classic studio, 3-camera and a vision mixing desk sort of things were made. And I was just really interested in that. And I think I was probably had enough of an ego to say, well, I want to sit in the director chair and figure out what that job's about. From there, they really encouraged me and some of my other classmates to go to the Dún Laoghaire College of Art, as it was at the time, which is now essentially the National Film School in Dún Laoghaire. And I went out there somewhat begrudgingly because I really wanted to stay at home in Coolock. But I was like, oh, this is quite cool. And so that then expanded, I suppose, my consciousness more into filmmaking and filmmakers and writing and cameras and just visualizing things, So, and then suddenly I was like, this is what I want to be, a director. I was going there knowing that I wanted to be a director. So at the age of 18, 19, it was quite, I suppose, early in some ways to have that decision made in my mind. But I found that quite quickly, I think, luckily.
Which I think is really useful, because you tend to find a lot of people, like at that age, they're interested in working within the industry somewhere, but they're still not entirely sure.
I know.
What is the kind of the right slot or space for them. So it's almost like a heads up or a head start a little bit to kind of go, yeah, no, I know what I want to be doing.
It was a huge head start, because I do meet a lot of people who would be like, oh, I'm not quite sure what role I would fit into or want to be in, but I like the idea of it overall. And of course, most people who, if they meet, say, hey, yeah, sure, come on and hang out and see what you can see, or here's a walkie-talkie, go and stand over there and kind of call quiet when we're about to roll and da-da-da. And then you end up in a role and you can kind of go, and maybe then you're good at that and you get some more work as that, and then you're maybe earning a living as that, and that's sort of then what you are, or you're defined as. And once you're earning a living and you can sort of, if you can pay your rent, or, you're just like now sort of a professional person, it's quite hard to change course at that point. So you might find yourself in a department you never planned to be in or thought you would be in. That can happen, or people can end up in the production office, and so, and like, it's funny, I would say sometimes to people, so what is is this really what you want to do, which is cool, or is there something else? And then people tend to, having watched things unfolding or worked on things for a while, sort of say, yeah, I'd really like to direct, or they see it more and it sort of breaks it down for them, if you like.
I think that is one of the great things about experience on set, is it is kind of like the best film school in a way, because you do get exposed to the jobs that everybody else is doing, and you can kind of learn almost by osmosis as well from watching, and pick up on okay, this guy's approach to stuff I think is good, or this guy's not so good. Are you kind of stealing little bits of ideas and stuff as you go along? Because I spent 15 years in camera, and you get to work with so many different directors. Was it 4 years that you did at Dún Laoghaire then, was it?
Initially it was 3. They had, it was just a diploma course. I graduated from there, I think it was 91 or 92. And then I quite quickly realized I needed to do something other than hanging out.
I'm just wondering, out of your time there, is there anything that you were taught in Dún Laoghaire, or anything that was said to you at the time that has kind of stuck with you and kind of stood by you for the rest of your career?
Yeah, wow. That's a great question. There might be one thing, and it was possibly literally a first day thing. And I don't know if it's really, really true, but one of our tutors, who was a writer, Philip Davison is his name, and it was sort of like, we're all first year sitting on our kind of looking at each other, scoping each other out, and what's all this going to be like? And he came in to sort of say, well, now you're in film school. And we were like, yeah. And he said, by virtue of the fact that you have chosen this, you've already sort of separated yourself from your friends, and you're kind of like, normality is sort of over now. You've chosen this. And I was like, what? What does he mean? But I sort of got it too. But for me, it wasn't such a big deal. I was already, in kind of the world of music. And an uncle of mine was a guitar player in Nashville and Los Angeles and stuff. And he came to Ireland, and I hung out, and I knew, I suppose, a lot of music people who would be very well known internationally, not like just here and stuff. So I was sort of already very well tuned in to an au fait with the life that wasn't going to lead me towards a job in the bank or accountancy or a kind of more, I suppose, perceived normal type of job, because most people would say our job's like not a normal job. Get it, real job is the sort of phrase,
So after you graduated, and this kind of a road that I think a lot of people try to go down after graduating film school, which generally comprises of, can I get a short film up and running?
Yeah.
Can I get some music videos maybe under my belt? Can I maybe even get demo commercials or something like that? Now, you did all of those, but you took a slightly different take at that point in time, career-wise as well, right? First of all, in one of the short films you did, you actually managed to secure Siobhan Fahey of Bananarama and Shakespeare's Sister fame
Right.
to partake in it, which would have immediately potentially made that project stand out a little bit more than maybe some of the other films that were going on at the time, which would have been a smart move on your part, right? But also the whole idea of like going to the UK at that point in time as well.
Yeah.
Because not a lot of people were doing that, right?
Yeah, it's kind of wild, but I think literally nobody was, or very, very, very. I mean, Neil Jordan certainly obviously had done, and Jim Sheridan very obviously had done, because they went to the UK to get financing for their films and stuff like that. But I think the thing that struck me was that not a lot, there were UK productions that would come to shoot in Ireland. Or US productions or whatever. And they generally would have their directors already, from the UK, experienced directors. So like Irish directors just simply were not being hired in terms of TV drama, not even on RTE stuff. It was just like, which was few and far between anyway, to be fair. But it was just, I was going like, how do I get this sorted out? How do I, actually have a career? Because, and all my friends and sort of colleagues and contemporaries there was very much the sort of, as the film board stroke Screen Ireland came back on stream, and then there was some funding, and then there was Arts Council funding and things like that. But I think because I had sort of grown up very much in a working, my dad was a carpenter, my mother was a bookkeeper, there's always this work ethic, make sure you can pay your way. And I kind of enjoyed working. I would work, I'd play guitar in bands and be paid for gigs. I didn't do gigs for nothing. Okay, that would happen, but we were paid. That's what we did. So I was sort of used to actually earning by either playing guitars or roadieing or doing whatever. And I just very quickly realized, like, in Ireland at that time, your choices were, stick it out on the hope of like maybe financing something after 3 years or whatever, your own thing. Direct commercials if you can. So I generated a commercials demo reel, as you've alluded to, and entered a competition and got a little bit of attention that way, and was taken on by a producer and managed to get going a little bit, which was fine. And then it was sort of like the UK. I just looked at it as a massive, because we grew up watching English TV, basically UK drama, TV drama. I thought, well, that's where it's all going on. So there was a book called the K's Directory or whatever. So that listed companies and agencies and everything else like that. No internet. So looked up, found 3 or 4 or 5 agencies, went with, as they now call it, physical media, VHS sets, of my 3 short films, and left them at the reception desks of about 4 agencies. I actually had a mobile phone, which was quite rare, because my then girlfriend was a doctor, and she would be on call, and she had a mobile phone, and they got a new one for her that she gave me. The old one was literally like a briquette. It was like a brick, but it worked, and they could contact me. So I stayed in London for like a week, just on a couch somewhere. And within a week, I had 2 offers of representation, and I just literally could not believe it. So there was like work going on. There was a demand for directors. I did not know anybody. I had no encounters with anyone in this sort of profession in the UK prior to this. And I just thought, wow, that's interesting. So I went and had some meetings and was basically offered from 2 different agencies representation. And it was sort of made very clear to me as what the process would be in terms of getting work and how that would happen, and that it was a long process, and if I was up for sticking with it. They saw something in my work, And when they met me, they kind of went, right, he seems to have enough cop on and he's not a complete idiot. So let's see how this can work. And that's what happened. So I connected with Casarotto.
Is that what led to Cold Feet then?
Yeah. Charlotte Kelly was my agent. Really, really great agent. Lovely person. And she wrapped me for like 20 something years. So I would go to London. She would arrange meetings, and this is how it works still, pretty much, go to London. There's less physical in-person meetings, which I think is kind of a bit of a shame, because part of it is not just the work you have done and your reputation and like a good sort of vetting. There's a heavy vetting process, but also like that you like each other, you get on, they like you, like when they meet, and then they feel you have something to say, and that you're intelligent and you sort of seem responsible or whatever. They need to meet you and check you out and see if there's a connection, and that's really important. And your connection with the material that they might be talking to you about. But literally it was like, I think there was a year and a half of flying over for a couple of days at a time, do 3 or 4 meetings or 5 meetings a day, sometimes meeting producers, production companies, BBC, ITV. You go in and meet the broadcasters and people and stuff like that. And I was offered TV directing jobs, and Charlotte would be like, not that one. No, not that one. We're waiting for something bigger. And I'd be like, I'm so broke and I'm fucking, to work. And she'd be like, no, don't take this one. She said, like, because if you go in at a certain level, it'll be really hard to move off that level. So we need to get you in as high a level as we can. And that was Cold Feet.
That is quite a high level to kind of be.
Yeah, it was the top show in the UK at the time. It was really extraordinary.
Was that's got to have been nerve-wracking going in there?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I got the producer came, Spencer Campbell flew to Dublin to meet me. Not because I don't think he thought I was particularly special by any means. I think he came to Dublin for the crack, really, because he enjoyed a pint. So we had lunch, and then I brought him to Kells for a pint, and then he went back that same day, and we had a good chat and a good connection, and it was clear I understood the show. I knew the show. It had been on for 3 seasons at that stage, and it was a really immensely popular show. So then the next day we got the call, so I got the gig, and I can't remember how long after that we started, and it was pretty crazy because scripts were incredibly late, and there was an awful lot of argy-bargy going on between writers and actors and all the rest of it. And it was a real extraordinary baptism of fire.
There is a story you told me once before, I don't know if you wanted to get into it here, about visually you wanted to put your own stamp on an episode. Do you know what I'm alluding to there or not?
I don't know. You might have to remind me a little bit more.
Where you decided you wanted to try and do a shot as a oneer.
Right.
And the producers, you managed to do that very successfully, and were very happy with the way that had gone down. And the producers showed up on set the next morning going, that was amazing. Don't ever do that again. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Because it's not like those types of shows are very much, you need essentially the coverage, as they call it, to be able to move the story to favor actors or characters where necessary in terms of emotional drive or story or whatever. But I'll have to find that oneer, man.
Because I think TV, maybe much more so even in those days, it was a lot about the close-up, right?
Well, yeah, and also Cold Feet was a really smart show for a lot of reasons. There were 6 principal characters. It was a 1-hour TV dramedy. So 6 principal characters and then some secondary characters, maybe an occasional tertiary character. But it meant that the 6 characters had a certain amount of pages of story per episode, right? So the writers knew and the producers knew that these characters or actors would be on screen for a certain amount of time. You could also schedule them. So you shoot about 5 pages a day. So Jimmy Nesbitt would be in, and he'd have like 4 days work and so on and so forth. But it also meant they would have more or less a very similar scene count per episode. So it was written to be schedulable and shootable within, I think, 11 days or 10 days or whatever it was at the time. Because also bear in mind, we shot on 16mm film. TV shows were not yet being made. I don't think so. Maybe it was starting to come in, but this was still a 16mm show. So we would shoot, and like a day would be about 15 or 16 setups on film, and that would do it. We would have plenty of coverage, and you would just choose judiciously, but there was no letting the camera run or let's just go again. It was like you really had to think about everything, which was a really, really great discipline. And also I think it made it fiscally very manageable. and organizable, if you like.
It's one of the big differences between today in a way, isn't it, as well? Because you're only running ones and zeros basically these days. It's like people kind of feel they can just let the camera go and go and go. Like,
Yeah, but it's not, data is expensive. It's a bit of a myth. Nothing got any cheaper and look, I love how it is now. I mean, like, don't get me wrong, I'm not kind of yearning for the film days or 16 mil particularly. I mean, obviously 35 I love, and I've shot TV shows on 35 and stuff. But when you're processing data and storing data, that's all really quite expensive. So no one should be under any illusions that letting the camera run just because you're in the digital space is any cheaper. It ain't, because it all still has to be processed. Someone still has to log it all has to go up as rushes, it all has to be stored, it all has to be dealt with and kept.
Maybe it's just a mindset thing, like, because certainly, like any directors I would have worked with when we were shooting 35, we're very aware of the burn as film was rolling through the camera.
Oh yeah, it's like pounds per foot.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
A foot of film cost X, you know what I mean, and everything.
The shipping costs and the
totally processing and everything. Yeah, transferring.
The good old days, right?
I know. Yeah. It was kind of cool.
And then from the success of Cold Feet, because you got BAFTA, right, for the episode you directed.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so like the remarkable and amazing thing was my first job in the UK was a BAFTA winning show, and so I directed what was supposed to be the ultimate final Cold Feet episodes ever, end of the fourth season, and the characters all go off to Australia for a big sort of wedding of one of their friends, and it all goes horribly wrong, and then it all goes horribly right, and that was BAFTA winning, so that was great. I mean, so then I'm like on the stage in Drury Lane with the cast and producers, Andy Harries, Spencer, and all the cast, getting a BAFTA. It was brilliant.
Yeah, it's about as good a start as you could possibly ask for, right?
So where did it all go horribly wrong?
No, that's not what happened. But it did lead to a lot of other UK TV work with guys like Robin Hood for BBC and Spooks and stuff. But at some point in time, obviously, an interest in what was happening in the US TV-wise was fermenting, because you took yourself off to the US as well. What were the biggest differences for you that immediately became apparent in terms of the way that television was being produced in the UK compared to the way it was being produced in the US at the time?
Well, I suppose my interest was, because I suppose cable was the big thing. It came in, and there were shows like Breaking Bad starting and things like that, and it was just like, this stuff's really, really cool. And the thing for me was, it was sort of the notion of just different worlds and different horizons, and just different cast and different types of stories, and just working in different places and with different people. I've always been interested in that, but just, I suppose, curious. Like, what's it like to work in America was one thing. What's it like to work with those kinds of actors, and what's their process like? But also, what's it like in Santa Clarita, or what's it like where they make Breaking Bad, or what's it like where they make things like West Wing and stuff like that? How does all that work? What's it like working in one of those studios? So I suppose the lucky move, or the lucky thing that happened, was the show called The Tudors, which was a Showtime, which was one of the big cable networks at the time, came to be produced in Ireland. And because of my UK work, I got a call for that, and I worked across the 4 seasons of The Tudors and did, I think, about 13 or 14 episodes of that.
I think it's the most episodes that any director did on that show, right?
I think that's right. Yeah. I think I was repeat business, but they really liked what I did and how I did it. And I suppose I was good at it, really enjoyed working with the actors. And I suppose I always had an ambition for every episode that everything I do is sort of a slight step up, if it's at all possible, in terms of where you bring the show, the visualization of it. And quite brilliantly, Michael Hurst, who's the writer stroke showrunner of it, was really open to that, and so were Showtime, which was cool. And there was a gentleman called Bob Greenblatt who was running Showtime at the time, and it was really interesting. It was sort of, you could quite easily, working on a show like that, when they would come from Los Angeles to Dublin, where the show was made, you got to meet everybody. So here you are in Ardmore Studios in Bray, hanging out with the head of Showtime.
At this stage, I guess people working in the industry here have gotten very used to, huge American TV shows being filmed here on a regular basis. But at the time of The Tudors, that was not the case at all.
No.
Right? That show was quite game-changing in the fact that production was based here, that it was a returnable drama, kept coming back year after year. Like with the caliber of actors, I mean, Sam Neill and Peter O'Toole and people like that on the show, like
Yeah.
that was a very significant kind of change that happened in the industry at that point in time, right?
It was, and all under the good offices of Morgan O'Sullivan, obviously, who was instrumental in generating or convincing government that the tax break was a good idea for an industry like this. And, I think it was because people were trying to make that show, but didn't quite figure it out. And I think financially it was always sort of tricky, but Morgan sort of convinced them that Ireland was a place you could do that show, that you could use the Canadian-Irish co-production treaty and the 481, the tax break, the tax incentive, and that there was enough, great Irish cast to build a series, and talent in terms of designers and directors and DPs and all the rest of it. Yeah, and it sort of spluttered into existence. I think it was a bit of a rocky first block or first season even, but it got going, and lo and behold, it was quite successful, and so it returned 4 seasons, which was amazing. So that gave me sort of traction in the US then, and that sort of after the first season, I think, then I went to Los Angeles and got representation there. And again, was sort of was delighted to find that people were interested, and that was the thing. I don't know. Maybe it's part of the Irish thing. I was like, nobody's interested in us, but like actually they are. But they're only interested if you're of use to them and sellable, and So it's a two-way exchange, and I want them to sell me, and I want to do interesting and good work.
But Tudors would also have been, I guess, for you, the beginning of a collaboration with both Morgan and Michael going forward across multiple other shows that would happen here going forward from that, right? Because you also directed, I think, the first 2 episodes, but the pilot episode for Camelot, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Stars as well, with Eva Green.
Yeah, amazing, yeah. Sadly, there were no more seasons of that, which I think they realized was quite a big mistake. It was quite a complex production, but it was sort of really set up to be a great show. Incredible cast, Joe Fiennes as well. And I was just like, this is amazing. We're getting such incredible actors.
But also that must have been a vote of confidence in you that you were selected to direct the pilot for that show, because, and maybe you can explain a little bit why directing a pilot is a much bigger deal than just coming on board for like a more regular episode of a show.
Well, I suppose the specific thing about directing the first episode or the pilot episode is that you're very much part of the creation and formation of a series. So you're working like sort of hand in glove with the writer stroke showrunner and the executives, and generally you would be part of the executive structure of a show, which allows you great input, obviously, in terms of the creative side of it, and also makes you a participant in the success of it, hopefully, you know what I mean, in terms of, I suppose, a financial position. And in the US world, less so. I don't think really is the case in the UK, frankly, but in the US world, so there's a fee that's appropriate to that goes with it, a negotiable thing.
Yeah, because I believe David Nutter, who I'm sure you're familiar with, became known as the pilot whisperer, right? Because nearly every show he directed pilot for ended up going to series. But he was saying for the show Smallville, he only directed, I think, the pilot and maybe one other episode, but like it went for 220 episodes. Wow. So that show made him a couple of $1 million for just being around.
Well, that's it. And and setting shows up in that way is really a very, very difficult thing. So that is earned. None of that is easy. And pilots are notoriously difficult because there's so much pressure and expectation. And the truth of it is, I think everyone's trying to figure out what the show is. And generally, obviously, in a US context, the budgets tend to be quite a lot higher. So there's a lot of risk financially. And then people feel the threat or the risk to their jobs, if you like. If it's not a success, like how many non-successes can you have? So the stakes are always really, really high in that context. So for David Nutter to kind of earn that sort of the pilot whisperer title is like, it's pretty brilliant, I've never met him, but I've sort of watched, he directed on stuff like that. And I've kind of seen some behind the scenes stuff, and I'm just going, he just looks like he kind of takes care of stuff, not through any overt. I just kind of feel like he's a person you're going to respect when you meet him. You know what I mean? He just sets himself in a certain way that people are just like, okay.
I briefly got to say hello to him once, and he did seem like quite a nice guy. Who might even willing to go over for a chat if we had a bit more time.
Sure, yeah, amazing, yeah.
But just in terms of comparing experiences, say between directing the pilot for Camelot in 2011 and then directing the pilot for Krypton a couple of years later. Was it easier at that stage, like, through all the experience gained over the period?
Yeah.
Do they kind of get easier to do as you go?
Yeah. And look, the thing about it is, I co-directed the pilot for Krypton, to be fair. There was another director and there was a change. It was a sort of, that had quite a crucible scenario in terms of coming together, and it seemed to go on for quite a while. And they were filming somewhere in Eastern Europe, and then they shifted production to Belfast, and I don't know, people's lives and careers kind of like, oh, I can't stick with it. I don't know. So anyway, I ended up sort of coming on board I sort of shot probably just over 50% of the thing. But yeah, but certainly, and then in other scenarios, I'm directing opening episodes, and they don't call it the pilot because it's a UK thing, so language is different and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, certainly all the experience of things like Tudors and obviously any work that you do brings experience and an ability to deal with people and situations in a more sort of, in an evolving and diplomatic kind of a way, to sort of not feel the pressure, and things like that. So it's good to do.
One of the things like that, like, is a skill that can't be taught in a way, is the politics of it all, right?
Yeah.
Which is fundamental to actually having a successful career as a director. I think especially in terms of directing television, because you're constantly moving through different production companies, different producers that you're working with, different network executives that you're like, how difficult was that for you, kind of getting a sense of, these are kind of the things to kind of the roads to go down, and these are the roads to avoid at all costs? Like,
yeah, I suppose rightly or wrongly, I tend to take people at face value and try to steer clear of politics or scenarios that seem political, or relationships that might seem political. I won't cite here, but certainly in my career, there's certainly more than 1, 2 to 3 experiences where I've seen politics kind of eat a show alive, really, and they're not around anymore, and just kind of go, well, that's why. It wasn't because the creative wasn't great, or it wasn't because the casting wasn't great. There was just like so much complexity within perhaps financial agreements between companies where they're never really happy, or relationships between people where sort of factions can form, and like all this kind of stuff can happen and isn't necessarily great for the show, or may not make working on the show a fantastic experience. Now, not like, listen, that's like, it's sort of, there's an awful lot less of that. Like most, I'd say 80-90% of my experiences have been really, really great. You can certainly end up in scenarios where you're kind of going, okay, this is a bit like, you gotta sort of just be careful here. And so I just really tend to stick to the professionalism of my job, bring as much creativity as I can bring to the scenario, establish good relationships, and hopefully build trust and provide leadership, I suppose, in creative terms, and in a collaborative kind of a way.
When you're working with maybe like actors like Malkovich or Eva Green or whatever, what's the approach? Like, how do you start off trying to kind of get them on side, if you like?
Yeah, well, like Eva Green was, like, both were fantastic, and Peter O'Toole, and like, there's lots of people that I've been really fortunate to work with, and generally speaking, those types of names that, in my experience, have been really, really great. Like, it's really professional. You sort of go in and have a good proper hello meeting, and so introduce yourself, obviously, and you're sort of talking about, like, but with Eva Green, we had to go and meet her and basically pitch her the project, I suppose, to convince her to come on board. So myself and Morgan went to London, and we met with her in her agent's office, and we had a good sort of 1-hour conversation about it all, and we talked about the show, and I was talking about the direction of it and how I saw the characters and everything else like that. And that was brilliant, and there's a surreal moment where you're going, like, we're sitting here with Eva Green talking about making a show in Ireland. Like, hopefully this would be incredible if it worked out. And and then she came on board, and she was really cool to work with. Not at all, there was nothing difficult or tricky or sort of intimidating about working with her. Very, very pro and up for the character and the process of working on it. Absolutely the same with Rosamund Pike in Wheel of Time. She's an incredible person to work with. John Malkovich was the same. I just really remember meeting him in his trailer where the show was shooting in Puerto Rico, where the show was shooting, and I was brought down one of the ADs, and hey, just try and keep out of the surreality of this for a minute, just be cool, you know, just that's the thing, is just stay cool.
Just being John Malkovich.
Just meeting John Malkovich here, and he was really low key, and he was a girl smoker, you know, so he'd rip the filters off the cigarettes, and I smoked occasionally, you know, and so I thought, well, he offered me a cigarette, so I took it, and we sat and just smoked and kind of chatted, and then we sort of moved on to the show. We talked about family, where you're from, and kids, and this and that. And we talked a bit about the show and the character, and like John's like, he's just all there with the character. Like I'm sort of getting a sense of what he's thinking, and he's like, you know, playing Blackbeard, and he's got a white goatee and a bald head. So I was like, it's just, you have to let John Malkovich be John Malkovich. It's the thing. And then and then my kids and Orla came by, and it was really fun. I think it was Anna was eating like a packet of crisps or something, and he was like, "Oh, you like those chips? You really?" It was just like, because he's a grandfather as well. So very relatable, very, very down to earth, and yet, you know, you just know there's a complete commitment to art in his soul. He designs clothes. He ran a ballet company, and obviously the theater company. So, you know, it was sort of like, I'd be talking about rehearsal process on set and stuff, like he's like, well, you know, what's rehearsal really? Like, if we're in theater, we're going to rehearse a thing for like 2 months. I mean, what are we going to do? Run it once or twice? And then I was going, I hear you. And yeah. And he's like, that's fine. And just give me notes. It's cool. And I was like, okay, great. And then first day on set, it was exactly that. And I gave him notes, and he was like, let's go. And that's exactly what he said.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
I suppose it almost feels like as you're going through this series of shows that they're sort of slightly scaling up a little bit each time that you do them in terms of the size of the productions. Though by the time you get to like something at the scope and scale of Wheel of Time, which is, I think, would it accurate to describe as the biggest show that you've done today?
Definitely. Yeah,
Definitely.
absolutely. Yeah.
Did you kind of feel that that was something you could take in your stride, or was there still kind of a new learning curve that was kind of happening with that show?
I had that show for breakfast, man. No, I'm kidding. I mean, the interesting thing about Wheel of Time is, so I'd heard about it, that it was happening, and I was like, oh, I wonder what that is. So I looked it up, and then I was aware of the books a bit, but I hadn't read them or anything like that. And then I got a message via my UK via Casarato that they wanted to meet, that the showrunner would like to say hi and talk about the show. And I was like, and they send, usually they would send the pilot script or something, so you know the vibe of the show or whatever. So I was coming into that first season at the tail end, like the finale, as it were. So, you know, and I was like, I was reading, I was kind of like, there's all these Trollocs and like I was kind of, what's going on here? And there was so much world rules, and it was really complicated. And I just thought, God, it's either going to be really a huge success, or it's just going to disappear. I couldn't really tell, you know, but I could sense a real strength in the relationships between the characters. So then, so I met with Rafe, the showrunner, Rafe Judkins, on Zoom, and I liked him straight away. He was just really cool and just really chatty and friendly, and he just had a really good vibe off him. And he was talking about the show, and he also loved the Vikings, and they kind of saw the Vikings as a bit of a they were like, they knew the budget level because they know all these things, because the people find out and they go like, how much does that cost, and making it in Ireland, what's that like, and all that kind of stuff. And they looked at Ireland and various places to make the show.
Are you allowed to say some kind of ballpark episodic budgets between those two shows for comp, say between Vikings and Wheel of Time? Or
well, all this is online anyway. I mean, you know, AI will tell you now, more or less. I think Vikings is around, Morgan Rose says about 3.5, but I think it's probably a bit more, around $4 million an episode. Whereas Wheel of Time would have hit around 15, sometimes 18 an episode. So I think they were sort of like excited by the world building that happened in Vikings, because the great thing about the Vikings is it went to other worlds quite often. In every season, there was a whole other place to go to. So there was always a new thing being set up, which made it really exciting for directors and designers, and challenging and all those things, because the budget level, while it does sound like a lot, and it is not a small amount of money, but it's not a lot of money for the value that show gave. And a lot of that is down to the talent and the designers and the world of the crew in Ashford and County Wicklow, you know. Just brilliant people, incredibly resourceful and committed. so then it was like Rafe was talking about Wheel of Time and where it happens and kind of how it happens, and then it was like Rosamund Pike's the lead, and then I was like, okay, well, if Rosamund's in it, it's got to be grounded. It has to be smart. That's just such a great idea and an incredible person to cast, you know, as the number one in the show. So I thought, well, if I'm offered that, I would definitely do it, you know. And I kind of, Rafe and I had this because we connected really well pretty much straight away, I think. And I think he was kind of going like, would you do it? And I was going, if you were to ask me, I'd do it. You know, it was one of those, you know. So anyway, I think that night or the next day I was offered the show. And so went out. And the thing that struck me, while Vikings, we had Ashford Studios and we had like a huge prop making and props department. But just like when I went out to Wheel of Time and the studios were just outside Prague, and they had converted a former truck making factory, which I think was about 4 acres on its own. And within it, studios, stages, and everything just was like acreage. Like the props department, props making world was like 150 people already. Costume department was like already 100 and something people. It was just like, oh wow, the scale is pretty vast. So I knew that this was going to be fun and challenging at the same time. But the great thing also was that there were resources, you know, for big world building and for great casting. You know, so yeah, it was really exciting. I don't think I was intimidated by it. I've never really been intimidated by scale or by budget. I think I just have a filter that says you just do your thing. And once you're doing your thing really, really well, everybody's going to be happy because you're going to bring something great to the screen, you know?
Yeah, because like if you've got a good team of heads of department around you and good people.
Absolutely, yeah. And Andre, the designer, was the designer on Krypton as it happened. So funny enough, I think that was kind of part of my way in, because one of the producers rang me to get a recommendation for Andre and what he's like to work with, because he's Prague based. He lives in Prague and all his team were in Prague. Like, yeah, you absolutely have to hire Andre.
On season 3 of the show as well, you were the producer and director. What extra responsibilities kind of come with that title?
Well, part of the responsibility is bringing on and working with the other directors on the season. So and the DPs and things like that. And I suppose it's sort of any directorial related types of questions or issues they might have. I guess I'm the person they would come to. And similarly, then the writers, I mean, obviously they can talk to whoever they want any time, but they might sort of come to me and talk about how could we achieve X, Y, or Z when that director may not yet be on in terms of prep. I would sort of have an overview in that sense and be very much part of the storytelling structure and part of the where we do what factor. It's like, if we go to South Africa, can we achieve this end of the storyline, or do we go to Slovenia for something? Or, you know, so you're very much part of the architecture that are making those types of decisions with the producer and with Rafe and the writer team and all that kind of stuff. So I'm kind of their director's eye, if you like, across the series, sort of fundamentals of it, if you know what I mean.
Can I ask, just as I guess to some extent, people in industry here would be very familiar with you as a producer or a director, but maybe less so as a writer and creator yourself, right? But obviously you co-created Kin,
Yep.
which has been a massive success for the 2 seasons of the show so far.
Yeah.
And you're working on a new show called Sarah Says at the moment as well. Are you always writing for something that, you know, in the end you're hoping to direct, or are they kind of separate mindsets that you kind of operate in terms of creating material?
Well, generally I'm writing stuff that I hope to set up to lead direct, if you like, and be a producer across. Yeah. And I wish I was doing more of it. And my big kind of issue has always been, well, thankfully I get to work as a director. So when you're working as a director, you don't have the time to write, frankly. So it's sort of in the in-between bits where you write. So Kin was, well, it originally started as another project called, it had a different title, it was called Townsend. So that was something that I originated. I mean, really back in 2013, I had the pitch for what evolved and became Kin, partnered with a UK company. We hired a writer, if not 2. It just didn't land, and I just said, look, I'm gonna write what I think it's supposed to be, because I had it very clearly in my head. I would pitch it and tell it to people, and then we get someone else to write, and people would go, well, why don't you write it, because you have the vernacular of this and the soul of it and the DNA of it. And I suppose initially I had written some stuff, but I didn't really I know. I just thought, oh, maybe I don't have enough of a writer name to be taken seriously. People know me as a director, not as a writer. And television is very like, oh, you're a director, that's your lane. You're a writer, that's your lane, or whatever. But at this stage with Townsend, it was like, well, nothing was going to happen unless I kind of said, look, I'm just going to do this. And I did that. And that's what worked. That took 3 drafts in and we were financed, basically, which is kind of remarkable. And then there was another sort of a development phase with Braun and Peter McKenna and stuff like that. So Peter was in the room, in the writer's room, and Fiona Ceres and Kate O'Riordan and Declan Crowlin. So we had a really great room of writers too. And then, it was just kind of, there's a very awkward clash between Wheel of Time and Kin and all that kind of stuff, and COVID and everything else like that. But nonetheless, out of all of that came a really great series, Kin, 2 seasons worth. And, I think we've spoken about this before, Des. If it was like, will there be more Kin? There was a time where it was definitely not. It's done because the financiers went bust, Braun Studios, lots of debt. Unfortunately, the creative asset and all my underlying rights caught up in all of that. But believe it or not, there are conversations, so we shall see.
Is that a little bit of a scoop then that we can?
No, I wouldn't say yet. Please hold on that. But maybe by the end of the month or November, we might know a little bit more. Yeah. But look, at the same time, it wouldn't surprise me if it just went away. It's just like,
well, it would surprise me a little bit because, like, considering the success of the show across like multiple different platforms.
yeah,
So obviously, like it's got like a very large audience at this point in time. Like,
Yeah.
you know, that is hard enough to find. And when you do find it, generally, you know, the rule in TV is, well, let's like keep trying to make this and satisfy the audience while the audience is still there for it. So
no, absolutely, and I think it's on the cusp. You know what I mean, in terms of audience and thirst and appetite. And I think financiers seem to be. I don't know what the wrangling is. I'm not getting involved. But audience, people would be like, "Oh yeah, that was a really good show. Yeah, where'll that go? Is there more? You know what I mean? Yeah, but stuff fills a vacuum. You know.
curiosity, out of curiosity, as a writer and a director and a producer, what's your take on everything that's going on AI wise in the industry at the moment? Like, just particularly, I think it's kind of feels like it's reaching some kind of boiling point right now because we've had a number of kind of big stories happen
Yeah.
in the last 2 to 3 weeks. One being the Tilly Morwood's completely digital
Yeah.
creation actress, whose creators went out and tried to get them representation and agency representation to get them work in the industry, and that presented a massive backlash from not just from audiences in general, but even some of the agencies themselves came out and said, "Look, we're not going to be doing that.
Yeah.
We want to work with
Primarily because their clients went, if you do that.
yeah, for sure, exactly." But then also this whole thing that happened where this Italian company created their own AI called Fellini AI and created and allowed the AI to direct, inverted commas, direct
Yeah.
a movie that's completely AI generated as well, which is called The Sweet Idleness.
Yeah.
People can find the trailer for it on YouTube if they're interested in having a look. It looks pretty awful, in all honesty.
It does, yeah, it looks pretty loud.
But in terms of a road that we're going down, is this concerning?
I think it is, for sure. You can't say it's not. I mean, the Tilly Norwood thing, I think there's a couple of things that are interesting about that. Sora 2, OpenAI, opt in, opt out in terms of content and talent and all that kind of stuff. It's just like, it's extraordinary that, you know, Netflix would have to opt out of their talent, their shows, their actor, you know, or whatever their creation is. And I think the representation thing was actually more about the company than it was about Tilly Norwood as a character. But that is all quite extraordinary. And I do think it's a bit frightening. It's a bit scary. But at the same time, we also have to kind of stay calm, because, well, how much will this really infringe on what most of us do every day? I can certainly see, like, in terms of directors and writers and actors and stuff like that. Now, like, AI is already being used by certain studios in terms of development, in terms of writing and things like that. In terms of responding and sort of reviewing scripts and concepts and things.
Yeah, there's a lot of giving out on writer Twitter in relation to, like, you know, inverted commas readers reports or even past editors coming on.
I think, like, I mean, that's just, to me, that's just an absolutely abhorrent scenario. It's like, it's just shocking, you know. And I suppose what we have to hope in the States particularly, that the guilds fight the good fight, in terms of SAG and directors guilds and producers guilds and things like that. I suppose one version of it is like, in terms of like UK TV drama, is that ever actually going to be written, directed and acted in an AI context by AI? I think there's going to be a world where AI is like, people go and watch AI stuff. I think that's for sure inevitable. What does that mean for film and movies generally? Well, like, US film and US cinema is already in a certain state of like, big franchise movies, big IP only, blah, blah, blah. There's an incredible amount of, like if you look at the Marvel world or whatever, massively entertaining, whether you like them or not, mass audiences, and that's a really incredibly high stakes game. I can completely imagine AI having a bigger role in that sort of stuff if it was allowed to happen. Would BBC TV drama or Sky drama or ITV or whatever suddenly start being generated by AI? I don't know. Would that be allowed to happen? Would audiences really buy it? Some of it will happen somewhere. Audiences will be in. Audience will step away. I think it's going to be part of our world, whether we like it or not, because I think the American Guild can't protect the rest of the world from it. If you see it's going to come out of China, it's going to come out of Europe.
I thought it was interesting. SAG actually pulled out a statement. I don't know if you saw it in relation to the Tuddy Mowood situation, which says that SAG-AFTRA believes creativity is and should remain human-centered. The union was opposed to the replacement of human performers by synthetics. To be clear, Tuddy Mowood is not an actor. It's a character generated by a computer program that was trained on the work of countless professional performers without permission or compensation.
Yeah.
And like, for me, there's two kind of elements here. At the moment, judging from a lot of what I'm saying online, there does seem to be pushback from audiences that they don't want what's generally being referred to as AI slop, right?
Yeah.
But the bigger question, there's two other bigger questions. One is about copyright and how defendable copyright is going forward. And I know there's multiple lawsuits going on right now with Disney and Comcast and others waging war against OpenAI and others about copyright improprieties. But the other thing then is, even if there is some acceptance of it, how do you monetize on this? So if everybody in their bedroom can make the movie that they want to watch, why would anybody else watch their movie? Because they're making the movie they want to watch, right?
Well, I think, how many people are going to sit in their bedroom making the movie they want to watch?
To start off with, maybe quite a few, but after a while, does it become old? Especially when you can't get any engagement for it, and can't monetize it in any way.
Yeah, I think that's one thing. I think Sora 2 and OpenAI are about to head towards monetization, from what I was reading today. So, well, I suppose we'll see how that goes, because when people have to start paying for it, like, that kind of probably changes a lot of.
Yeah, plus I think they're talking about adding in loads of ads and stuff as well that you've got to go through before you can start adding.
Because it can't be free all the time. I mean, this is all about business and about money in the end. Yeah, so I don't know. I just kind of feel like there'll be a certain section of movies which may just all end up in an online world, which are AI generated, and that will probably exist. And like in 2 generations' time, there'll be a certain cohort of people who just watch that sort of stuff and they're fans of it, kind of like a version. I'm not equating manga or anything or animation necessarily with it, because they're produced in a very different way. This is like AI generated stuff, and like if it's engaging, it'll find an audience. I think in terms of cinema, I was talking to a producer the other day, and we're like, oh well, cinema will just all end up like grown-up independent cinema, let's say, which are, well, might just end up in festivals and certain smaller cinemas and our lighthouses of the world and things like that. And then what happens to the multiplexes? Well, they'll probably struggle, as they are anyway, with sort of the tentpole movies and a certain amount of higher end, budgetary speaking, independent type films. So I think it's just gonna. I don't know. Like, I'm trying to predict something. I have no real idea. I mean, so I'm imagining it's gonna find a corner and it's gonna exist. For sure.
It is very hard to predict at the moment as well, because I suppose it's nascent, but it feels like it's building in opening in kind of different corners. but it's also
For sure, and it's sort of like YouTube in a way. And YouTube's obviously not, well, I mean, there's algorithms involved, but like, YouTube started here, and now it is the biggest platform.
it is like the stream wars are over. YouTube is the winner, like fully declared at this point in time. Like where we're in a situation where like, Netflix is trying to set up a number of different shows now with YouTube content creators, because it's effectively IP if it's in a different way, right? So it's like they can prove they've got engagement, they can prove how many subscribers, how many views, and all the rest of it, and it has already successfully transferred over. Does that make it much harder though for traditional writers to like be going forward into the new space with like I've got a great idea,
I think it's hard anyway. I mean, as we all know, post the strikes and post COVID and all that kind of stuff, I mean, there's literally 50% less TV being made in America.
Great retraction news.
Approximately 40% of UK crews are unemployed at the moment. But that's probably in the context of the streaming bubble in the last 20 years, maybe 15 years. I think in the end, and like, and certainly like what you can see that has happened in the UK is like a lot of the independent production companies get bought up by bigger companies. So essentially you end up where you might have had 25 or 30 or 40 companies. You really only have sort of 8 or 6 or something, You can afford to develop with the biggest writers and get their pitches in the door. And
I think this is one of the other challenges we're facing though as well going forward, because there's been so much merger and acquisition, right? Everything seems to be about consolidation in the space at the moment to try and offset as much risk as possible. Bigger companies are acquiring either middling or smaller companies, also to build up the library so they've got more IP potentially they can exploit going forward. But like, if we take, for example, say what's happening at the moment with Paramount Plus have just been taken over by Skydance, right?
Yeah.
Primarily funded because David Ellison, who owns Skydance, his dad is Larry Ellison, who owns Oracle, is the biggest company in the world, right?
Yeah.
But one of the first things he does is bring in Cindy Holland. He was like one of the original architects of Netflix and who was responsible for a lot of the hit original shows that actually got them up and running.
Yeah.
Now Amazon seems to be doing something similar with Peter Friedlander, who's also at Netflix, bringing him in. And does it start to feel like the solution for every other streamer is to Netflixify going forward or something at this point in time? Like,
yeah, I mean, I suppose for Paramount Plus and for Amazon, I mean, they're sort of the big player of the market is Netflix, and why wouldn't they want to emulate that success, I guess? And one of the ways of doing that, obviously, is by hiring people who are proven in that field, in that area. But at the same time, obviously, they want to sort of forge their own identity and presumably make material that feels like it's an Amazon thing or it's a Paramount thing. So it's hard to know what their game plans will be going in, but there's no doubt Paramount absolutely needs to grow. Of course, I mean, I think that's sort of the perceived wisdom anyway in the town, as it were, in the state, in Hollywood and Los Angeles and all that kind of stuff. But Ellison's plans for Paramount, we don't really know what they are, other than he's got to turn this empire into a whole new type of media machine of some sort or other, you know what I mean? So I think he'll be looking for big innovations, and I'm sure he'll be using AI to some extent in there, as much as he can.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I was really kind of taken aback was like very shortly after the acquisition, all these rumors started breaking out that Skydance were now looking into potentially acquiring Warner Brothers as well.
Right.
And I'm like, would you not try and concentrate on fixing the issues with Paramount Plus and trying to grow that to start off with before looking to potentially acquire Warner Brothers on top of that? I like it doesn't feel like a good spot where like there are fewer places to go, there are fewer places to shop ideas, like at the end we could potentially just be left with like 3 potential buyers or platforms.
Yeah, I mean, it's also though, what's the audience who's subscribing to what? Where are you going to subscribe to, or what are you subscribing to? What back catalogs he can bring to all of that, or he can gain with those big buys, I suppose. I mean, for you and I to figure out what David Addison's going to do, I'm not a big shot business person in that kind of world. But like, I suppose if you look at how long it took for the Paramount deal to actually happen, and obviously it was complicated, and Donald Trump was kind of part of that complication, and that just seemed to drag on for quite a while. And maybe if they are doing the Warner Brothers thing, like that could drag on for quite a while. So he might just be getting the ball rolling and knowing like that's not going to close for 5 years or something.
Yeah.
Who knows?
I would also find it slightly surprising as well because Warner Brothers have had such a stellar year at the box office. Like they've
Yeah. I mean, look, rumors become, you know, this like can become conflated, I suppose. And you know, I think one thing that's sure about this business is we love a good rumor, you know what I mean? We absolutely
daughters on
love a
rumors.
gossip and a good rumor, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Is there anything you'd have to say about Sarah Says or not at this point in time?
No, I can't really say anything about
Okay.
Sarah. No. So I just can't.
Okay.
I don't have any news on it, frankly. And I have this other thing called 110 Wars, which I would hope to have news on soon, which is a kind of a large scale series set in the world of global weapons manufacturing.
Well, they're timely. It's in
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, based around the life of a CEO of one of the biggest firms in the world. And at the time of research and writing, the top 4 CEOs were female, which generally seems to be an unexpected thing. But I sort of like that world. And I think I've been trying to figure out, you know, why a show like West Wing was so successful. Why, you know, even the Tudors, you just have these characters who are in incredibly powerful positions and have power of life over other people, power of life over death. You know, they can kind of create immense amounts of chaos for people. And then you have characters trying to relate to that or survive within that. And then I think in that industry, there's a geopolitical kind of reality as well. And they are people we know very, very little about, you know, in terms of media interviews and all that kind of stuff. It's like I just think there's mystery there, there's intrigue there, and there's a lot of power there, you know. So I think, and that feels like a more contemporary sort of on the news, if you like, type of show to go out with. But now I'm working on Grown Up, so I'm directing that. So that's obviously full time. So it's Marion Key's book, which has been adapted by Netflix, Netflix UK. So that sort of means that the writing stops for a little bit, but I've got to do. I'm doing 4 episodes of that. So that's quite exciting.
At this stage in your career, are there particular things that you're still trying to kind of tick off the list, if you like, going forward? Is there, you know, a benchmark that you still are trying to aim for, like career wise? Or
yeah, I mean, you know, I often, I suppose when I'm asked this, it's always like to make a movie, you know, but I kind of feel the movies I want to make are kind of like, people are like, oh, that's kind of, you know, everyone says, oh, you'll never get that made, but like the more you say it, the more I'm going to try, I suppose. I do have a contemporary Cuchulainn story. No one's done Irish mythology on the big screen yet. I'm determined that there's a way, and that I'm the person to do it, of creating like an Irish cinematic universe. You know, why the hell not? We have incredible mythologies and stories which are quite complex and tricky and difficult in terms of imagining them on the screen. But I'm kind of thinking it's the themes and the relationships that are really interesting, as well as the adventures and the sort of the action of it. So I'm sort of pulling that sort of those elements out of it and putting them into a contemporary context, so that financiers and studios can go, oh, we get that, and that makes sense. And it's like, you know, because the thing about Irish mythology is there's no one big huge book. I mean, there are some, you know, locally produced comics which are really great, but if you're looking for, like, we need like 50 or 80 million to make a thing, you know, you need something big behind it. So we don't have that. We've like 150 books that just aren't kind of landing, let's say, in terms of the top 10, let's say, of publishing. So that like a Warner's or a Universal can go, oh yeah, like, you know, X million gazillion people bought this. So it's about sort of finding a brilliant story, putting it into a world where we can get it made at a reasonable price, I suppose, and hopefully cast one of our brilliant, or some of our brilliant, internationally renowned actors here. So I've got the script for that, and I need to start getting that out next.
last question, I'm going to steal from the great Barbara Walters here. What question should I have asked you?
Should you have asked me? What would I do differently, I think, is a good question. What is or it's like, sort of, it's sort of follow on from the one you just asked me. It's like, what is the earning? Because this is what is the thing you haven't yet directed or made or written, like gotten onto the screen, that sort of gets you out of bed every day? Because I think creative people are, and maybe it's kind of the creative tradition we come from, or, you know, or the artistry element of it. Because what I do in terms of directing television is a fantastic creative process with a lot of craft attached, but it's not innately mine. Do you know what I mean? So it's the so what decision could I have made earlier in my career that would be allowing me, let's say at this point, to be making things that are innately mine?
I'm going to cheat.
Go on, yeah, come on, Des.
One last little one.
Getting down to it now.
This is almost an aside, but I've always been curious. Your production company is called T4 Productions.
Mm-hmm.
Is this because you were a huge fan of Thunderbirds and it's named after Thunderbird 4?
No, it's not. No.
Are you able to disclose why?
Yeah, no, it's not. I wish it was that, and maybe I'll just kind of say, "Oh no, it's from Thunderbirds," and it's no, not at all. No, when I was forming a limited company, which made sense when I was directing properly, when I got going, like in the UK, my accountant advised me that I had to have a company, and I was like, okay, that makes sense. And then he says, well, you need a name for your company, and I was like, right. Couldn't think of a name, and I think it was his idea. Oh no, it wasn't his, it was my idea, because the whole thing was I was doing Cold Feet, and when I directed commercial, it was like you always hoped you'd get like the exotic commercial, like you'd be flying off somewhere to a beach, which meant you'd be flying to London and then out of T4 in Heathrow. So, and I was flying to Australia to direct Cold Feet, so I was flying out of T4, and I thought, well, this is it, T4 Productions.
You see, it's almost like you manifested it. But
Yeah.
the secret works. So we do this little thing at the end of every episode called Creators' Choices. And you've got a choice of 10 questions. You can pick 3 or 4 numbers out of this. You don't know what the questions are before we ask them. They're all going to be fun and easy questions, so there's no need to be overly concerned about it. But just to give us an idea of maybe like what kind of things are ticking the box for you, artistically speaking, at this moment in time. So if you want to give me a number.
6.
Whose Instagram feed gets your regular attention?
When I check Instagram occasionally, it's like usually Rosamund Pike or maybe Rafe Judkins, which obviously speaks to my Wheel of Time life.
Okay, give us another number there.
3.
Most recent movie seen at a cinema.
Oh man, Superman, the last Superman.
What did you think of it?
I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it a lot. Sometimes I just want to go to a movie and completely enjoy the escapism of it. And I have a small, tiny bit of history with the Superman world, the Kal-El world with Krypton, which was a show that I worked on and directed and all that. And I suppose, I remember the sort of epic event of the first, or our first Superman movie with Christopher Reeve and all that kind of stuff. So I knew there was a sort of a revisit after all the Henry Cavill versions and all that, the Henry Cavill version. And I just thought, yeah, I'll check it out, see what Superman looks like. So sort of as an origin story or an original Superman sort of thing in 2025. And I enjoyed it. I think it really caught the fun and the sort of the optimism and hope, which is sort of what, the whole...
Yeah, I think that was the big takeaway, was that like one, it was kind of like comics book accurate, if you like, kind of take on the character. But also it was brighter, it was more colorful, it was more adventure, and there was some humor in it as well, which I think a lot of people have kind of felt was maybe missing from Zach's kind of interpretations over the years of
yeah, but equally I enjoy that stuff too, you know what I mean? So like for me, it's sort of not necessarily one over the other or a preference, but I just really enjoyed it and saw that it certainly reverted, I think, to the spirit of the earlier iteration of the original, if you like. For sure it did that. And yeah, definitely a great 2 hours or whatever it was in the movies.
Yeah. And is he a better Superman than Henry?
Come on. You know I can't answer that.
I know you can't answer that. Okay, give us another number there.
5.
Best compliment your work has ever received.
Oh man, that's a good one, because there's not very many of them.
That can't be true.
Well, no, it's I suppose the online world is where most of that resides, now. I think season 3 of Wheel of Time just got a massively positive reaction from fans and audience and even critics alike. So that was really, really, I suppose, heartwarming, I suppose, in a professional sense, because we put a lot of effort into making that show, and particularly on the third season, as I directed so much of it, it was just really great to see how well received it was by the fans, particularly. So I think ultimately that's just a great compliment, you know.
No, it's got to be, because like some of the stuff the fans, like some of the stuff they actually did was incredible. Like taking out the video screen in Times Square and the billboards, and then
Yeah.
the planes flying the messages and stuff.
I know, yeah, absolutely, yeah. No, truly, truly dedicated to a series, to a show, and to a world, yeah.
So Amazon, if you're listening, there were a lot of cliffhangers there at the end of Wheel in Time season 3. We'd love to know what happens next.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, Ciarán, thank you so much for all your time today. Really appreciate it. And best of
Pleasure,
luck.
Des. Anytime.
Thank you. Best of luck with everything coming up. Thanks for listening to State of the Arts. We hope you enjoyed your time with us and that you can join us again in 2 weeks for a new episode. Until then, please remember that art matters.